Hey everybody, welcome back. It's Tab Sleep Lover, and today we're continuing the photography composition masterclass. This is episode 11. We're going to be digging deep into the top 3 photos of Martin Parr, and he is a wacky character. He works for the same exact company as Henry Cartier-Bresson, Steve McCurry, Joseph Kudelka, all of the greats of street and documentary photography at Magnum Photos.
Do we have a picture together?
Yeah.
Right, who's taking... Oh.
I don't know. I'm not going to take it.
And he's considered one of the most controversial photographers to ever be accepted into that company.
I'm told I'm the most controversial new member they've ever taken on, that there was a lot of people, a lot of the older members of Magnum took a particular dislike to my work, and it became a very heated debate.
You know, the older statesmen of Magnum were a bit surprised themselves that he was accepted. But I think it became a kind of symbiotic relationship in the sense that I think Magnum suddenly realized that they needed him as much as he needed Magnum, because he had these roots into the editorial world.
But we'll see why that is, because a lot of his photos are pretty wacky and pretty obscure compared to most street photographers. And this first one is a great example. This is part of the luxury series, and we just see a bunch of cropped out people, their drinks, and some high heel shoes here. But it is very interesting. If we consider these drinks as people, we have nice separating shapes here. Okay, there's nice figure-ground relationship on these drinks. There's a nice dominant diagonal in this shoe here, and we have the primary colors. A lot of street photographers capture these colors, red, blue, and yellow, in their photos, and then we have these nice neutrals to separate them. But he's creating a pretty funny story, just kind of like the end of a night. This woman's tired of walking around in her high heel shoes. She throws them off, and it's just amongst all these mixed drinks and just different cocktails on the ground. Kind of weird place to drink, on the carpet here instead of in the bar, but it looks pretty comfortable. But let's throw on the grid here. This is the 1.5 grid, and we can see this shoe. It's funny to use such a powerful composition tool on such an abstract image, but it's useful for all types of art, including these weird photos by Martin Parr. But we can see how this high heel shoe is paralleling the dominant sinister diagonal. If we just grab this and run it down here, you can see how it's paralleling right there perfectly.
Just look at it. Just look at it. Yeah, well, what the heck is that?
Pretty interesting. And a lot of these drinks are locking in. Kind of interesting to see. This one is on a polar point right here. The polar point's where the major diagonal intersects at 90 degrees with this reciprocal. So right here, they're intersecting at 90 degrees. And that 90-degree angle is pretty important. Especially if you're a master painter, you can design these 90-degree angles into your composition to add a sense of strength. So we can see this one is on the horizontal. This little part of her leg is paralleling the Baroque diagonal. And then this drink right here is locked in on that vertical, and it's creating a coincidence with the heel and the drink here as well. So whenever we have a linear movement and it unifies multiple edges, so right here, here, and here, that's a coincidence. Got that linear movement, so we got movement going up there. He's also separating this shape here is separated from this shape, which is good. And it's also separated from these black straws. This shape here is separated from the black straws. So if those straws were overlapping the dark shapes, it wouldn't have nice figure ground relationship. But overall, pretty abstract, interesting image. But if we pull back, we can see how this image is kind of overexposed in this area here. And a lot of ways you can fix an image. Any photos you have that are overexposed in areas, you can add another layer and put it on the multiply layer mode. Got this mask here, and it's allowing this multiply layer mode just to affect this lower section here. So I can turn it on and off. You can see how it's just saturating that a little bit, bringing the image back to a proper exposure. So that's a little trick you can do if you have some areas that are overexposed. But we can also add a vignette on there just to bring a little bit more attention back to this interest in the center here. All these little separated drinks and shoes, creating a nice little story. But let's check the balance real quick. We'll turn on the vertical and horizontal center lines and just want to look at the negative space, see if there's any areas that are lacking interest. And this area is definitely lacking interest. Got a lot of interest up here with all these drinks and the dark shapes. plus here, with especially with the red on the edge here. This edge flicker here, adding a lot of contrast, but then this side has a lot of negative space. So most of the weight in this composition is on the top half, which makes sense. And then the composition is right heavy also. It's got a lot of weight on this right side. We've got more weight on this lower half, and then a lot more weight on this upper right half because of that red dress. So let's take a look and see if we flip this, if we get more movement. So the composition starts here for sure. Our eyes are definitely drawn here more. Her arm is creating this movement this way, and then we can see how the drinks kind of circle this way. And so does the background, and I didn't notice that before, so we are getting more movement once the image is flipped. You can see that arc sweeping around there. And then the Baroque diagonal also adds a little bit more movement. So this shoe is on a Baroque diagonal now, and it's adding a little bit more movement because we can easily read from left to right going up this way too. Got that movement down here, and then the movement going up here, starting with this edge flicker and then coming in this way. Pretty interesting to flip it. Well, that's that one. Move on to the next one. This one's pretty powerful, and he does a lot of different photography projects, and it seems like he allots about 3 years for each project.
So it just suddenly struck me that the one class in British society that hadn't really been documented were the middle classes. So this was inevitably the next project that I should do.
Once again, Parr immersed himself for 3 whole years in the world his pictures documented. Only this time, it was his hometown of Bristol and the surrounding suburbs of Middle England.
And this is one of his other projects. It's called the Common Sense series. And he goes around with this macro lens. I think it's a 100mm macro lens. So he can get really close to these people, get really nice detail. And he's using a ring light on the front of the camera to fill in the shadows and capture this vibrant, saturated color. So a lot of the images of this series are just kind of close-up crops of different objects and people. And it's not as stronger compositions, just a different way to capture things, little details, kind of like if you're a wedding photographer capturing the details like the silverware or the menu or flowers, things like that. He's just going around and capturing certain details of people and objects. So we can see this woman's just capturing some sun. It's pretty funny. He's got a pretty funny sense of humor too, and capturing these little blockers on her eyes, and they match the background. You can see how he's capturing some of these primary colors, but the red, the blue, and then he's got some yellow tints in here. But we got some nice dominant diagonals right here, just in her pose there, kind of like creating a trapezoid around the image. Her lips are really thin, and her lipstick's just painted on there. Got a little mole here. You can tell it's pretty hot. She's starting to sweat a little bit right here. But she's got, working on those tan lines right here. And got the gold chain. That'll leave a nice little tan line around her neck. But pretty funny image. There's not much to the composition. He's got a nice figure ground relationship. He's got the aspect of view, and he's got those strong dominant diagonals, but there's not much to the composition. We have a little bit of edge flicker over here, right here and here. And one way we could take care of that is just to use a vignette if you want. Vignette that a little bit and bring more attention back to this woman's face. Or you can crop it. So if we crop down and say we don't even want to include those sections, we can crop it down, and we still have the same image, we still have the same story, and it just looks a little bit more cleaner. Okay, so you can always just snip off certain areas to clean up your image if you need to. Now let's line up the grid. We can check the balance. We can move the grid over to this arm, and we can see how it's paralleling the Baroque diagonal there, so that's pretty good. And the tilt of the head is paralleling here. If we line it up there, we can see how it's paralleling that diagonal. That's the sinister reciprocal diagonal. Pretty cool there. Let's check the balance. Let's turn on the center lines here, the vertical and horizontal center lines. And the vertical center line is always going to act as that fulcrum, kind of like a teeter-totter, back and forth. We've got to balance back and forth from that vertical center line. But if we look at where her head is placed, we've got a lot of her facial expressions on the right side here. We've got an arm and an arm. That's pretty balanced, but her gazing direction is kind of going this way. See how her face is tilted this way a little bit? So that adds more visual weight to this side. Plus we have this edge flicker, which adds a lot of weight because that high contrast near the edge grabs a lot of attention. So we do have a kind of right heavy composition. If you just take a look at this area compared to this area, it's a lot less going on here than there is here. We've got this gold chain, the edge flicker, this right here. So then over here, there's a lot less interest. So we do have a right heavy composition, which is something to pay attention to. You always got to consider the gazing direction of the model. It's weird to think of this woman as a model, but she is, and she's doing a great job striking a pose.
And that's fine.
She's fine.
Now let's see if we flip this one, if we get more movement or anything like that. And it doesn't look like there's more movement. We've got definitely the edge flicker still up here, creating a lot of distraction now because most of us read left to right. So we do have a lot of edge flicker here. So our eyes will read around the image and we'll come back up here. So it's adding even more emphasis on this edge flicker, which is not good. So it would be better just to crop that out if we had to. And then we'd probably have a stronger image if we had to flip it. Okay, so that's interesting. Now let's move on to the next one. And these images, this is part of his Last Resort series, and these are where his compositions shine. And he does have a lot of black and white photos in his early years. He has some pretty good compositions in those as well. I think when he started switching to the macro lens, that's when his compositions started to become a little more relaxed and more simplified and not as interesting to look at. But he's definitely capturing an interesting and hilarious story in this one. Almost like this woman down here is about to be ran over by this bulldozer, and the little girl's trying to save her, kind of saying, "Wake up, mommy, wake up." And this guy in the background is just like, yeah, I'm not gonna have anything to do with this. He's just walking off, moseying around. Pretty interesting story, and if you look at it, a lot of his other images from this series, they're pretty funny as well. And he got criticized for these images because he's kind of exploiting this lower class type of people, where there's babies laying next to the trash and they're all crying and they're just eating a bunch of junk food and they're just uneducated looking. So he got criticized pretty heavily on this one.
And there's no doubt that the pictures that Martin showed were considered by some people to be rather Thatcherite. And one of the books he did actually look as though working class people are all scruffy, dirty, rather unintelligent people.
But he got great results, and he tried to redeem himself by going after the middle class next, which is another great series to check out. But I did find this image is actually, you can see a lot of detail like in this machinery, and the colors are great, but the size was a little bit off. Like you can see how there's black here and black here because the image is a little bit shorter, and I measured the size of it and it was only a 1.2, and most images with this type of rectangle is a 1.25, so like a 5/4 kind of image. So I did find another one that had the full image. You can see how this more colorful one is just a little bit more cropped off, but we do have the full image. We're not missing any interesting details. I just always wanted to double check to make sure the size of that is correct, and then we can apply the grid later. So I did find the proper size, which is cool, but we're not missing anything. But we do have a dominant diagonal in scene. It's a very prominent diagonal, and it's coinciding with this machinery in the background. You can see how it's creating that diagonal and coinciding right here. Also have these shadows here coinciding with that. So if we run a straight line this way and this way, it's coinciding. That's a nice coincidence there. It's also creating this triangular shape here. So we've got geometric shapes kind of hidden within there. And if we check the balance, let's turn on the grid, and I'm going to draw the vertical and horizontal center lines. So if we turn this off, we have a lot of visual weight on this side with the person right here, the child and the man, plus the machinery. So a lot of visual weight on this right side here, and then we have this structure, the towel, and then this bag kind of adding interest on this side, plus this bucket of whatever that is, and we have some red here. So it looks like the composition is more right heavy. If you squint your eyes, you can see we have all this visual weight, all these dark shapes here, and then we have these dark shapes plus these dark shapes. So if you ball these up, I did this in another video, if you kind of just like scrunch them up and into one ball, and then you scrunch these up into another ball,
Cabron, I need to see you a boss.
you kind of have equal weight from left to right as far as the dark values, but then the girl right here in the pink, the woman and the man add even more weight to this right side. So definitely have a right heavy composition. Now in this case, whenever that happens, you can always flip the image and see if we have something with a little bit more movement or balance. So we definitely see way more movement, and this is what I call magnetic momentum. So whenever you have a lot of interest or contrast on the sinister diagonal, this is a sinister diagonal now because it's going from upper left to bottom right, and we definitely have more movement because the way we read from left to right. So we've got this contrast and interest here, and then it's following down the sinister diagonal, when before it was just stuck in the right side. See how it's pushing the movement up into this area here, and it's kind of being stuck because we don't have a lot of interest or contrast bringing us back over here. So that's really interesting to see how the image is flipped and we're getting way more movement. Let's turn on the grid, see if anything's locking in or paralleling these diagonals. We can see how this girl's torso is locking in there and paralleling the diagonal there. If we drag the grid over, you can see her arm is paralleling right here. Okay, that's pretty cool. Always want to check the diagonals in your scene with the grid. So we can move this up. We can see this guy's arm is paralleling that diagonal perfectly. Pretty cool. And then down here we have these dominant diagonals. Right here it's paralleling perfectly, but then it curves off to the left. But diagonals are the key, especially if you want to create visual impact instead of having a flat, boring scene like straight up verticals and horizontals. That usually creates really boring or quiet scenes, which could be nice if that's what you're going for, but a lot of the times we don't want a boring scene. But that's it for Martin Parr. We start out with something simple and kind of quirky, but it does adhere to a lot of design techniques like figure ground relationship, separating shapes, and we have a dominant diagonal. He's using the 3 colors, the red, blue, and yellow, which is a great technique for capturing color in your photos. Then we move on to something that's a little more simple in terms of composition, but he is using design techniques like figure ground relationship and aspect of view, and he's also capturing dominant diagonals and creating a pretty funny story. And then we move on to more powerful compositions where he's creating a more interesting story and working with balance and colors. A lot of textures in this one as well, and then capturing diagonals that adhere to the geometry within this rectangle. But that's it for today. This is going to be an epic series of over 50 photographers, so if you want to see a photographer bumped up on the list, be sure to leave a comment down below and I'll see what I can do to help you out. But until then, stay in touch.